and welcome to GameSack. A few months ago, I did an episode about bad games from great companies, but this time around, I thought I could do something a little bit more positive and look at good games from companies that generally have a pretty low reputation. Now, for a couple of these games, I had to stretch the definition of good a little bit, but thankfully not too much. Anyway, let's start off with a company that probably has the worst reputation, at least as far as 8-bit games go. First up is LJN, a toy company known for horrendous games based on licensed properties, mostly for the NES. They published garbage on that system like Back to the Future, Friday the 13th, and The Karate Kid. They were eventually bought up by Acclaim because, as everyone knows, Acclaim, they like trash. True Lies on the Super NES is a pretty good game though. This one was developed by Beam Software. As you know, this is based on a 1994 movie of the same name, though I guess there was a somewhat recent TV show as well. You're Harry Tasker, and the game mostly plays as an overhead run-and-gun shooter. Each and every stage is based on scenes from the movie. Well, most of the stages anyway. Often you'll have different objectives, but it's usually simple things like attaching a modem to the computer, which is done by simply walking up to the computer and then getting the hell out of there. Some stages, like this park, you need to find keys to unlock gates. Because, as you know, all public parks have hedge mazes and keys laying around for people to find. There are actually a few different stages where you need to find keys. Or this one where you need to find a way to reroute the infinitely long train so you can get across the tracks. Each stage is quite large, maze-like, and actually pretty fun to work your way through despite that. Also, what's up with the fight with the terrorists in the bathroom? They just keep popping out of the stalls again and again until you blow the doors off. Where are they coming from? Are they crawling up out of the toilets? You know what, I think they are. Be careful because you can shoot civilians, and if you do it too often, you'll get penalized for it. Or penalized, however you want to say it. I like how Tom Arnold gets on your case for shooting the taxpayers when the stage doesn't even take place in the USA. Come on guys, didn't you even see the movie you're making a game about? There's even a brief shooter stage where you fly a Harrier jet. During the run-and-gun stages, it can be tough to aim Harry sometimes since he is extremely right-handed and your shots come from his right side compared to how it would be if the shot somehow came from the center of his mass. This is one of those times where realism brings things down a bit, but you can kind of get used to it. Your enemies have a small hitbox, but be warned, you do not. The graphics are generally pretty good all around. The music kinda sucks though. A couple of the stages use ambient sound instead of music. This was also on the Genesis, but all around it's generally not as good, though it's still decent. But THQ didn't do this one, it was published by Acclaim. Overall, this certainly isn't a legendary game, but it can definitely be enjoyable. The Punisher for the NES was also published by LJN, and it was also developed by Beam Software. This third-person shooter is based on the Marvel comic, just in case you didn't know. It plays in a similar manner to Dynamite Duke. You move a reticle around on screen and kill enemies. They, of course, are also shooting at you. You're big, so their shots can be tough to avoid, but if you're moving away from them, well, that seems to really help. Still, you can soak up damage rather quickly. Fortunately, by shooting various parts of the destructible backgrounds, you can reveal health up icons to restore some of your life. You can also get more ammo. If your ammo runs out, you can still shoot, but your rate of fire is incredibly slow. You can also get a machine gun which shoots really fast and it's super fun to use, but again, the ammo is limited. You also have a powerful grenade that you can throw, but it only goes straight ahead. You can upgrade to the missile, which is basically the same thing except that it fires in the direction of your reticle. There are some bonus stages here and there as well, and you can shoot down the Daily Bugle newspapers which will give you hints on where to find them. Of course, there are boss fights, and these can really suck your life dry if you're not careful. I like it when you fight Jigsaw. He runs right up to you and then you punch and kick each other in the face. Overall, the graphics are decent to good-ish and the sound is quite minimal. There's no music during gameplay unless you come across the Sax Man. It's pretty funny if you shoot him though. I usually just let him be because, you know, what did he do to you? And plus you lose some of your own life if you do shoot him. I think if this game had some good music and better drawn graphics, it could have been a great one. But as it is, it's still quite enjoyable. Be sure to give it a try. This next company, well, if you've been watching the show for a while, once you see them, you probably know what's coming, so let's just get into it. Titus was a French publisher and developer who released some really bad stuff.
Did you just say tits?
They've been described as the Tommy Wiseau of video games. They made some awful titles, including RoboCop for the Xbox, Blues Brothers 2000 for the Nintendo 64, and Superman, also for the Nintendo 64. They closed down in 2004. Well, in 1994, RD Lightfoot was published in North America and Europe by Titus for the Super Nintendo. This is a side-scrolling platformer developed in Japan by ASCII. You play as RD Lightfoot. Bet you didn't see that one coming. You have a little blue item named Peck who's your best friend, and he accompanies you on your journey. The gameplay is reminiscent of both Decap Attack and Monster World 4, both on the Genesis. You toss Peck as a weapon in the same way you toss your head in Decap Attack. If you take a hit, Peck goes away and you're on your own until you can find him hiding in a treasure chest. Again, very similar to Decap Attack. But that is definitely not all. Peck can get special abilities to help you navigate the stages, like letting you float around for a little bit. This is similar to how Pepe Le Goo in Monster World 4 works. You can avoid some attacks by holding up for a little bit to hide behind a mirror. That's dumb, but okay. You can jump higher by holding the jump button and then landing on your tail, which will spring you higher when you release it. This takes a little bit of getting used to. Overall, the control could definitely be more accurate, but if you're patient, you might be able to master it. Hey, that rhymed. The biggest issue with this game is that it's hard. You can only take one hit if you don't have Peck, and your hitbox is fairly large. Without Peck, you can only defeat enemies by bouncing on them, but you need to hold down while you do this, otherwise it won't work. This is all well and good, and normally this would be a fine challenge to overcome. But the thing that really makes this game as hard as it is the inconsistent momentum of both the character and the scrolling. It can be quite difficult to aim where you want to land from a jump, for example. I'm surprised that they released the game in this state. Still, you can kind of get used to it and have some fun here. Fortunately, there's a password feature. A very odd and inventive password feature, I might add, where you need to place the different icons in different places around the screen. The graphics are mostly very well done, with color and detail that you'd expect from a good Super NES game. The music is well done as well. Okay, that's too many wells, but the music is good. It kind of sounds like they used the same instrument library from A Link to the Past. So this definitely isn't an excellent game, but for this company? Well, for them, it's quite stellar. An even better game is Prehistoric Man on the Super NES. This one was not only published, but also developed by Titus.
Did you just say tits?
Hey, stop it! Anyway, this platformer is like Chuck Rock, except that it's actually enjoyable. Dirty deeds are afoot and all of your food has been stolen by dinosaurs. Don't they know that they're supposed to be extinct already by the time cavemen existed? Stupid dinosaurs don't even know how to be extinct. Anyway, you're off to get as much of it back as you can. You'll collect food during the stages as well as bones, which is your currency. That's right, there's a shop here for your convenience. You kill enemies with your handy club, but you can also get other weapons from time to time. You can also bounce on them, but this only stuns them for a bit. You can ride on spiders to get to certain places. You can also ride on turtles to get other places. You can run by holding diagonally up or the attack button as you move. Overall, the control works very well, certainly no complaints here at all. You usually just need to make it to the end of any given level, though there are some that you need to do certain things before you're allowed to leave. like gather a bunch of jewels which are hidden in different locations throughout the stage. Between each level, you're judged on how much crap you've collected during the stage. Knowing how uppity and prude Nintendo is, I was quite surprised to see the words "damned pathetic" typed out in a Nintendo game. And yeah, I'm damned pathetic, what of it? Surely you are not surprised. This game is really fun and honestly quite challenging at times. No password here, unfortunately. That's probably my biggest complaint with the game. There's a hang glider level which I absolutely hated at first, and you even need to get all of a certain item before they let you pass. But I kept trying, and it didn't take too long before I got the hang of the controls. After that, I found this level to be really fun. The graphics in this one are extremely colorful and very well drawn. Lots of detail everywhere as well. And, of course, great scrolling. The music isn't outstanding, but it fits the game just fine. Honestly, I'm just beyond belief that Titus was even able to create this game. What happened? I assume it was an accident. Seriously though, everyone should give this one a try. They later developed and released this one on the Game Boy Advance. It's basically the same game, just done in the GBA style. The control is a bit more loose and there's more momentum to deal with, but it's still good. The hang glider level is actually much easier to control. I mean, nobody is going to have any problems the first time they get to this level. Of course, since the Game Boy Advance has a lower resolution, you can't see as much of the stage compared to the Super Nintendo version. You can look around a little bit, which you could also do in the Super Nintendo game, but you're going to be doing it more here. And yes, this version still has the "damned pathetic" text, which naturally shows up for me when I play. This version gets a kickin' new soundtrack, which can be pretty awesome in some stages. Amazingly, you just can't go wrong with either version of this game. So play one, or hell, maybe even both of these, and bask in the amazing glory that was brought to you by Titus.
Did you just say tits?
Okay, you might not think this next company is too terribly bad, but they seriously put out a ton of very low quality shovelware, like seriously huge amounts of it, and in my opinion, they're way more bad than they are good, which is why they're featured in this episode. That's right, I get to make the rules. Anyway, let's get into it. Alright, it's time to check out THQ, also known as Toy Headquarters. In case you've already forgotten what I literally just said, they made way more bad stuff than good. I mean, they released some awful stuff like Wayne's World on the Super NES, Pit Fighter also for the Super NES, and Race Drivin', yet again for the Super NES. There's a few games that I think are good that I'd personally like to focus on though. The first is Sonic Advance, for the Game Boy Advance, hence the Advance in the title. That's right, Sega didn't want to publish this one themselves because, as you know, nobody knows who Sonic is and it probably wouldn't sell well at all. I mean, they did make the game themselves. Sega was still busy with the Dreamcast at the time, so letting THQ handle the distribution was probably in their best interests. And what can I say, it's Sonic the Hedgehog. However, it was certainly fun to play him on a different system, a Nintendo system at that. Of course, because of that, I just had to buy it, and it was sure weird seeing that THQ logo on the box. You can choose which character you'd like to play as in the beginning. You have your typical moves that Sonic can do, like running and also jumping. But if you press jump again in midair, he does a little attack thingy. You also have your spin dash, of course. The graphics are really nice, with lots of great color, which is very important for a Sonic title. The music can also be fairly good at times, though not quite as energetic as past titles. It also sounds a little fuzzy since it's on the Game Boy Advance. I do appreciate how every individual level in a zone has its own music though. Gotta say, even though I'm not a huge Sonic fan, this one's pretty good. THQ also published Sonic Advance 2. It's mostly more of the same, but there have been a few changes. You now have to unlock the other playable characters before you can use them. The game places much more of an emphasis on speed this time around, and you'll just be holding one direction or another for a lot of the time. The boss fights are now their own stage, and I like that. The music is more energetic, and you know what, I like that too. Sega loves THQ, so it's no surprise that they also did Sonic Advance 3. This one forces you to choose a helper character, which brings it down quite a bit for me. It also has a hub world now. They took away your mid-air attack for some reason. Some of the obstacles can be a bit difficult to avoid. I don't know, I'm not feeling this one, but you may like it. In fact, you probably will. I mean, everyone tends to like Sonic games more than I do. And just for fun, I'll mention Sonic Battle, which was also done by THQ. This one is kind of a fighting game that also has a story mode. I don't bring this up because it's necessarily great or anything, but it's interesting that it exists. A lot of people seem to like it, at least based on the written scores I glanced at on GameFAQs, so try it if it looks good to you. Destroy All Humans! Is a series published by THQ. This is the first game running on the exciting Xbox console from Microsoft, but it was also on the PlayStation 2. You play as an alien named Crypto. Of course, these days, all I can think about is digital money and scams when I hear his name. Anyway, his mission is to harvest DNA for his people, and that means destroying a lot of humans in the 1950s. The entire game is basically a parody of UFO stories as well as 1950s culture. There's a lot of real humor and attempted humor in here.
At this time, we wish to abduct you for the purpose of scientific research. The procedure will be protracted and invasive.
You can zap people until they die, then you can extract their brains, which explode out of their heads to collect some DNA. You can project a human hologram so you don't alert the humans to your presence. You can even scan them to read their thoughts without killing them.
Hold on to your hats, boys. I'm going commando.
You have other tools like an anal probe. And you can float around and wreak havoc in your flying saucer. This is pretty fun. You upgrade your weapons, your saucer, as well as get new things back at the mothership between missions using the DNA points you've acquired. You have tons of different missions in different locations. You can hypnotize people so they willingly walk back to your ship so you can probe them. The game controls well enough for what it is, no complaints there. The graphics and sounds are typical for the era, and they're good for what they are. The game itself is pretty fun, and lots of other people love this series as well, so be sure to give any of the games in the series a try if you haven't already. Except maybe Path of the Furon, that might be the low point, though it's still playable.
My name is Private First Class. Kill my father. Prepare to die. Gotta get
THQ also released Moto GP for the Xbox. This series was developed by Climax and is different from the Namco series on the PlayStation 2. I really like this series on the Xbox. You race motorcycles around real-life closed-circuit tracks, and your goal is to get to the finish line before all of the other motorcycles. The controls are quite nice in these games. It feels extremely smooth, and you have independent control over front and rear brakes. I also highly approve of the camera. It's so cool how it tilts when you turn, even when you're racing using a third-person view. This was an early-ish game for the console, so the visuals can be a tad sparse in spots. It'd be nice if there were some non-real tracks to add a little variety. The music is fine, but since this is the Xbox, it's one of those games that allow you to assign it a custom soundtrack. I still say that no other console has ever gotten this feature right, only the original Xbox did. It's not just constantly playing on top of everything like other consoles do it, it actually makes your custom soundtrack feel like it's part of the game. Moto GP 2 and Moto GP 3 came along and they increased the quality of the visuals as well as the amount of options. They added this weird camera view. Who would want to race like this? This is dumb. But the good news is that they let you improve your bike as you win races. Moto GP 3 even adds what it calls extreme street tracks. In addition to the regular real-world circuits, there are races that take place around the world that might be too extreme for you to handle. Since it's not just the professional tracks, a lot of visual variety is offered, which is a breath of fresh air. It certainly adds to the overall experience, making it feel more complete. And more gooder. THQ would continue releasing MotoGP games on the Xbox 360 with MotoGP 06 and MotoGP 07. These, honestly, aren't quite as good. The visuals are in HD, but with that comes a healthy dose of screen tearing, especially in MotoGP 06. Unfortunately, it doesn't feel as nice to control either, and it's much easier to make your guy go flying off of his bike, especially in MotoGP 07. Fortunately, the extreme tracks are still here, though they need to be unlocked in MotoGP 06. So while these games aren't bad, you might want to stick with the ones on the original Xbox. Capcom, using a different developer, would take over MotoGP starting with MotoGP 08 on the Xbox 360. Okay, 2 companies left, and they are both just seriously awful, and it was very difficult finding good games from them. But I was able to do it. Kind of. Ocean is another company that people find mostly bad. I mean, they made games like Dennis the Menace on the Super NES. Let's see, Cool World also on the Super NES. And some RoboCop games, including RoboCop 3 here on the Super NES. It was tough, but I found some good stuff. Ooh, another rhyme. Like Micro Machines on the Super NES. This was developed by Merit Studios. Codemasters wasn't involved in this port, but it still basically plays like any other version of Micro Machines. You need to finish first in the race or you can go straight to hell. There's a lot of momentum in this game, maybe a bit too much. The stages are pretty cool, though the graphics are just as simple as the other versions. The sound and music in this port are both quite bad. It's never been an amazing game no matter which one you play, but it can certainly be lots of fun, especially for this company. Ocean also released the original Worms game. This is Worms Director's Cut, which is the original, just with more stuff. I'm playing on the Amiga here just because I wanted to try it with a keyboard and mouse, but Ocean also published it for different platforms like the Game Boy and the Super NES. Anyway, long story short, using a keyboard and mouse doesn't seem to make a huge difference for me, at least with this game. This is a turn-based strategy game where you need to annihilate the other team's worms before they do the same to you. Each worm takes their own turn. Weirdly, the life meter isn't always showing, but you can just move the mouse up and see it if you want. I'm playing as Team Worms, by the way. Best 2 out of 3 wins the match. There are lots of voices here, and they can sometimes be funny, like when they say stuff like it otherwise sounds pretty desolate without any music. I added the music that you're listening to from the title screen just so my review here doesn't feel too boring. I mean, you know, more boring than they normally are. But you'll likely still have lots of fun with this game even without any music, or you could always just put your own on. This game had tons of sequels that were not released by Ocean.
Whoa! What's this? Stupid!
Or how about MRC, Multi-Racing Championship on the Nintendo 64? It was developed by Genki. Most people will probably look this one over, but when it came out, I really enjoyed it for a couple of different reasons. Firstly, it's an arcade-style rally racing game, and Sega Rally left me wanting more from this genre for nearly 2 years at this point. It does a decent job with the racing, and you unlock more courses as you win. Secondly, this was one of the first games I ever played with a rumble pack. This blew my mind at the time, being able to literally feel the different road surfaces as I drove over them. These days, of course, it's pretty trivial, and hell, I usually turn the rumble off in most games I play these days because the gimmick has mostly worn out its welcome, aside from some of the haptic feedback a few modern games have. But back then, rumble in video games was incredible. This game took me into the future. Yeah, the game is blurry as all hell and has lots of fog, but it's still fun. The soundtrack is energetic as well. Pretty good for a game with the ocean logo on the box, I say.
Countdown. 9, 8. Come on, you've got to do better, or we won't make it in time.
One last game from Ocean that I think is fairly good is Navy SEALs on the Game Boy. Now, you'd think this game would be just an average day in the life of any given Navy SEAL and used as a recruiting tool, but it's actually based on the 1990 movie with Charlie Sheen. It's a side-scrolling action platformer that kind of plays like a dollar store shinobi or Rolling Thunder. You can shoot and jump, but you can't shoot whilst jumping, and that's this game's biggest flaw. You can also crouch and even shoot while you crouch. You can collect points, which is pretty awesome. Navy SEALs love points. What Navy SEALs don't love, however, is being lightly touched by anyone. That's enough to cause a catastrophic and horrible death. If you ever need to take out a real Navy SEAL, just touch them. I mean, it's not like this game is going to be unrealistic or anything. You also collect gun power-ups and ammo. You can also call in the cavalry with a select button. It's definitely difficult to react fast enough sometimes, but once you memorize the levels, you'll get it. The graphics are fine for the Game Boy, and the music can be pretty good. Ocean had good music in their games way more often than they had good games. Anyway, check it out. Tiertex is primarily a developer who is based in England. They're known for their low-effort ports of games to the different consoles. They handled embarrassing ports like Turbo Outrun to the Mega Drive, Strider on the Master System, and they developed Supercross 3D on the Atari Jaguar. Generally, they're a bad developer all around. But was it all bad? Well, they're responsible for the ports of Flashback on the Super Nintendo here, as well as the PC, 3DO, Jaguar, and CDI. I've never been a fan of this game, not even a little, so I don't count it as a good one. However, there are tons of fans of this game, so I thought I'd mention it. These games are good for Flashback, they have all of their flashbackiness and stuff. But I did find a couple of games that they make that are almost good, like Toy Story Racer on the Game Boy Color. This takes the Toy Story movie and makes it a wannabe kart game. You can of course choose from several different characters from the movie. You don't grab and use items like a normal kart game, but there are several things strewn about each course that you can pick up which can either help or hinder you. Like a snail, which will slow you down for several seconds. Or a steering wheel that reverses your steering, that's super fun. Or maybe a tire that improves your handling briefly. I wish this one would last longer. Or how about a lucky horseshoe? This makes you invulnerable from getting hit for a little while. You can also collect coins. I don't know who wouldn't like that, coins are awesome. If you lose a race, the character is out, but you can buy them back if you have enough coins. Controlling this game kind of sucks at first, but it doesn't take you long to get used to it and start excelling. I'm amazed that this is a Tiertex title. I mean, just look at it. Say what you will, but this isn't low effort at all. I'm sure I'll talk more about the technical aspects of this one in a future Pushing Hardware Limits episode sometime. This certainly isn't a great racing game by any means, but for the Game Boy Color, it's not bad, and you can even have some fun with it. There's also Desert Strike Return to the Gulf for the Game Gear. This is a port of the original game on the Genesis from EA. I think it's perhaps a little tasteless to make a video game sequel to a real war that had just happened, but hey, it was a good game nonetheless. You fly your helicopter around the desert and you need to accomplish many different objectives in each stage. like destroy all of the radar dishes. Then take out the power plant. Next, you want to destroy the airfields. Then you gotta blow up the command center. Finally, you can rescue the prisoner. The game suggests you do these in the order that they tell you, but you don't have to. However, some things can't be done until certain objectives have been completed. It's a difficult game, and it should be since there are only 4 missions. It'll take some time to complete each one. Fortunately, there's a password feature. It's made a bit more difficult just being on the Game Gear since everything is cropped in and you can't see really much of what's around you. Fortunately, you have your map, which can show you where everything is. But it is kind of annoying to constantly need to switch the screen to it. Still, this is a competent port of the Genesis game, all things considered. Incompetence is not something that one usually associates with tier techs. The graphics are good for the handheld, and the sound is fine. The Genesis game didn't have music during gameplay either. Seriously, this one's not bad at all. Tier techs also handled NBA Live 98 on the Genesis. This one's a double whammy because it was distributed by THQ. And yes, somehow it's still from EA. Anyway, this basketball game ain't half bad. It uses an isometric perspective that works mostly well, though I've always personally preferred the horizontal layout like NBA Jam. The game looks and moves a little clunky, but it's plenty good enough to be fun. I actually enjoy this game, you know, all things considered. It was also released on the Super NES, again from both tier techs and THQ. It's still a good game here, but not as good as the Genesis version. The controls and the gameplay just don't feel as good. The sound effects are certainly better, but the graphics aren't as good. The jaggy diagonal lines on the hardwood court seem extremely severe here. The Genesis version has extra detail, like the name of the arena at the ends of the court. You can't go wrong either way, but you'll do better with the Genesis game. Leave it to the British tier techs to save their good programming to an American sport of all things. And there you go, good games from bad companies, or good-ish games in a couple of those cases. So, are there any other companies out there that you feel are bad, and do they have any good games? I know there's probably some companies out there that have no good games, but hey, let me know anyway. In the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack.
Okay, this is a commercial for Sega's upcoming 32X console, which will blow the competition out of the water. Please convey the sheer awesomeness of the 32X. Take one and action!
The 32X, it conveys sheer awesomeness.
Cut! Could you hold the 32X in frame so that people know what the hell you're talking about, please? Take two and action!
The 32X, it conveys sheer awesomeness.
Cut! Okay, maybe not just repeat what I told you, but come up with some reasons that people might want this incredible piece of cutting-edge technology. Take three and action!
THX, wait till you see 32X.
Cut! Okay, we're not competing with Lucasfilm's theatrical whatever it is. Talk about the 32X for crying out loud. Take four and action!
With the 32X from... the 32X from Sega, with the 32X from Sega, you can turn your Genesis system into a 32...
Go blow your nose, you weirdo! There's some tissues on the table down there to your left. Hurry up! Okay, let's go. Come on.
With the 32X from Sega, you can turn your Genesis into...
What the hell, dude? That's gross! Wipe your face off, you moron! No, what are you doing?
With the 32X from Sega, you can turn your Genesis into a 32-bit arcade machine.